Okay, let's give it a start. So welcome everybody to this webinar around spend management. The webinar will be hosted by Ervan Patel and me, Gurjan Terwena. I will show a short agenda, what we will cover. So a short introduction, then in general, what is Cloud ERP based on Salesforce Financial Force. And we will go a bit more in depth on the spend management part. And we will then finish off with a short demonstration presented by Ivan. And we have some room for questions and answers. Okay, so if we talk about Financial Force, so for the ones joining the webinar and don't really understand or know what Financial Force is. So Financial Force was created in 2009, now serving over 1,000 customers globally, headquartered in the US and also with a strong presence in the UK with their development center. It's built from the start natively on the Salesforce platform. So in essence, Financial Force is one of the strongest ISV partners for Salesforce. Now, Financial Force itself, it's a full stack cloud ERP ranging from accounting, HR, supply chain management, professional services automation. So everything you can think of behind once closed the deal, so to say, in terms into a project. Then we talk about Cloudteam company. So Cloudteam company, we are the official partner of Financial Force, the official implementation of Financial Force. We started off being specialized in Financial Force from the start. So also there we are completely, let's say, specialized in this area, and that's the only thing that we do. We've grown now into 18 experts. We serve our customers throughout Europe, and some of these customers also have subsidiaries across the globe. So we actually also serve across the globe our customers as well. Now, next to that, we have an Apex development center in Eastern Europe, and we have a financial service center in Pakistan. Let's say our aim in helping clients is going from cloud ERP strategy and digital transformations down to the concrete implementation of Salesforce Financial Force as the full stack delivery of an digital transformation, so to say. Now that's also one of the reasons why we have our Apex Development Center, so we can, in the same go, we can also make small enhancements based on your specific request as a client. Now, we're also based on our Apex Development Center, we are, some of those enhancements, we are transferring those into through apps, like a payable invoice scan app, which can then also be purchased by our clients. Okay, our team of experts, like I said, we have grown to 18 people. As we speak, we also have a office in the UK. And that means that
Porque aquí no me hace caso. No, tienes que irte a tu, dale a Esc y vete a tu escritorio, ahí. Ya, pero...
Okay, so you just have to mute the person. So we can also now serve people from the UK, which is giving an even a farther reach to let's say, the different projects requests that we get. Well, with the team of experts, we can see we have served, let's say, in multiple areas, let's say our projects. So ranging in the different modules from FFA, so the financial management part, PSA, the professional service automation, the HCRM part, so the HR module, also down to CRM and Billing Central. So we covered the full range of the platform, and this is also an example how clients normally implement it, and going from one module to the other one, and sometimes they take all modules in one go, and those are obviously then a far bigger projects. Like I said, we've also developed a couple of apps giving us the possibility to further localize and enhance, let's say, a setup specifically in this case for Europe, looking at the SEPA bank integration, for instance. But based on many requests, we also develop a payable invoice scan app that will, let's say, lower your manual effort in processing all your payable invoices. It's automatically scanned and then recognized in your platform, in your Financial Force setup. Okay. Now, if we talk about the cloud ERP part, it's kind of visualized in this way. So being one platform, the Salesforce platform, the one cloud platform, on top of Salesforce itself developed their CRM part and also their marketing cloud and their services cloud. But if we see now the continuation then with Financial Force, it's picking up from those modules down to quoting and ordering, supply chain management, professional service automation, billing, financial management, up to your HR part. And in essence, it means that you are able to get your 360 view on your customers from every angle, every aspect. And this is quite unique. And we can surely claim that Financial Force Salesforce combination is for that reason the number one ERP platform in the cloud. Okay, well, let's dive into a bit more into the spend management part, which is in essence part of supply chain management. So we just took out one of those topics, which is sometimes a burden for our customers. And I will give the floor to Irvan. So I'll stop sharing, and Irvan, you can start sharing your screen.
Sure.
Or you want me to click through? I'll click through for you.
Yeah, if you don't mind clicking through. So yes, let's talk about spend management on the Salesforce platform, part of Financial Force's supply chain module. So this is really kind of aimed for customers who have Financial Force already or considering Financial Force as their finance system. So let's say, for example, customers who already have FFA, they might be controlling their purchasing spend in numerous different ways. They might be doing it outside of Financial Force through numerous spreadsheets, emails, and a whole kind of mixture of different things to kind of control and manage their spend. Or you might even have a third-party system, which is then integrating into Salesforce. So it would make sense to have it all on one platform within Salesforce itself. And that's where Financial Force's spend management comes into play and can be of particular use to Financial Force FFA customers. Now, within spend management, it's your typical flow, to be honest. Most PO systems, purchase ordering systems, work on a similar principle of a purchase order being created. Before that, possibly a requisition, which then needs to be approved. Once it's fully approved, you receive the goods and you receive an invoice based on those three elements: a purchase order, a receipt, and an invoice. You can do, it's usually a three-way match, can be a two-way. And based on the match, a payable invoice is paid, basically. So that's the flow. That's the usual flow, and that's the flow in Financial Force spend management as well. Okay, you could do the next slide, Gertjan, please. Okay, so some of the benefits. So by using spend management, Financial Force spend management, you've got it all on the Salesforce platform. You haven't got third-party systems, and you haven't got various spreadsheets to control. You've got it all there. You can report on top of that. You can do all sorts. Just having it in one place just makes it a lot easier for your end users and more visibility, which then kind of avoids extra rekeying. If you're kind of controlling it in spreadsheets, then you're having to do some of the financial aspects of spend management in Salesforce again. So you've got kind of double the work in some aspects. So it kind of eliminates that. Plus, you've got the power of Salesforce in there as well in terms of workflows, approvals, and you're using the Salesforce tools to build on top of the spend management module as well. So it gives you a lot more flexibility, a lot more control, and a lot more gives you the opportunity to do more with your spend management as well. And again, because it's all on one platform, you've got complete visibility. Salesforce is very flexible, and if the data's in there, you can see it, you can report on it, giving you complete control and consolidated purchasing. So it gives you a lot more control, a lot more visibility, and it's all on one platform. Some other benefits. So in general, having a PO system, a purchase ordering system, gives you the opportunity to control costs for indirect and direct spend through various different ways by having selected suppliers in the system and catalogs and so on. It also kind of gives you the chance to control your suppliers, who you're ordering from, so that it prevents contract leakage and so on. It also gives you the chance to enforce, spend policies within your organization. Sending your requesters, your PO creators, down a certain route that you want, which will probably, in conjunction with your purchasing department that you have, and you can kind of, enforce that through workflows and approvals to kind of control that. Again, because it's all in Salesforce, and Salesforce is great with reporting and data and so on. You've got a 360-degree view of everything that's going on in terms of your suppliers, your open POs, receipts, invoices, everything. It's highly visible, highly audible as well. And based on that, you've got the opportunity then to kind of drive and build on top of basic spend management, if you start off with that, and kind of continue to improve on top of that, by adding extra functionality or just enforcing what you want to do. Maybe that's around supply performance or through approval flows or whatever you like. You've got the flexibility to improve there, and you've got all the tools there within Salesforce to make that happen. And yeah, again, because you've got all the information in there, accounts and so on, you've got the opportunity there to source suppliers, to pick the best suppliers out there, make sure that, purchase orders and you're ordering from the best suppliers out there as well. Yeah. Next slide, please, Gertjan. Okay, so that's the spend management part. From FFA's perspective. But I'd just like to talk about PISA, and I will kind of show it later on in this webinar. But PISA is short for Payable Invoice Scanning App, and this is an app that's been developed by us, Cloudteam. And it's part of the spend management process, but if I just kind of talk about it at a high level, how it works. So the whole purpose of PISA is to kind of have a smooth flow in terms of payable invoices. So the way it works is your supplier sends you an email by email to a designated email address. The invoice is scanned by ourselves. It's done through automated workflows and so on. Once it's within Financial Force's FFA module, the invoice is, internally reviewed. Again, you can kind of, this is flexible in terms of how many, if you want approvals around that part and so on. Once it's in the PISA app, the invoice itself, you can review the invoice itself and then post it. As a, it creates a payable invoice and you can post it to your general ledger accounts and so on. And it will then update your PO. So it's a handy thing to have. It's a good way of having a smooth flow process for creating payable invoices, having a way of holding all your invoices as well, if you want to kind of head towards a paperless office kind of a route and so on. So it's a really good app, and we'll kind of show how it works with spend management further down the line. Okay, next slide. Okay, so yeah, just a couple of more points about the Pisa app. So yeah, it is automatic matching up to a point, but you are still reviewing the invoice before posting, so you can still make changes before you post the invoices, which is really important. And yeah, you can you're matching against the purchase order. So just a little bit more information on the Pisa app itself. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's dive into the system now. If I share my screen at this point, we will now go into the system itself. Okay, everybody can see my screen?
Yeah, it's visible.
Great. So I've logged into one of our demo environments, and we're on the home page, and you can see a number of tabs. So I've added this tab, purchase orders. So this is your first step. I'll also show you requisitions, but let's start off with purchase orders to begin with. So a purchase order is basically an agreement with a supplier in terms of what you're ordering from them. So I've got this home page. Again, it's very flexible. It's a view basically, so you can add information from the PO that you want to see as an overall view. You can take columns away, you can add columns which are on the purchase orders and so on. But this just gives you an overall view of the purchase orders in the system at the moment. So it's got your purchase order number, sites, the status, which is important, and the order type. But I'm going to go ahead and create a new purchase order. So there's two types of purchase order. We're going to concentrate on the main one that you'll be using most of the time, which is an internal purchase order. Yeah. So if I click on continue on internal purchase order, it brings us to this screen. Now think of it as a header. So this is the header information of a purchase order, the high level information that you require. So if you have multiple companies you set up, within FFA for your organization, it gives you the option to pick which purchase order, which company you're creating a purchase order for. Now, for this demo, I'm going to use Merlin Technologies Limited. So the next step would be to find a supplier, the supplier that you're going to order your goods from. So it's a lookup. This is linked to your accounts. So in your accounts, there's a vendor type called supplier. A record type called vendor. And it's based on that. So this will show you all the suppliers. So you've got control over here in terms of what the user will see in terms of suppliers. So I'm going to pick Gadget Company. Now, ship to warehouse. This is basically your shipping address, but again, it's a lookup. You can have different shipping addresses if you have different office spaces and whatnot. So I'm going to pick Merlin Technologies. This is an address that I created earlier. There's a bit of a hierarchy. We don't really need to go into it at this moment, but you have warehouse and a shipping address attached to it. But yeah, this is your shipping address. You can then put in who the buyer is, but we'll leave that for now. And you can put in some additional information here. On the right-hand side, you've got some extra columns that you're not really going to do much with at this moment in time. You've got the status, which is the status of the purchase order itself. There's a number here. At the moment, it's open. We don't, we wouldn't touch that. The delivery status, this is to do with how the purchase order is being, sent to the supplier, but we won't do anything with that again. Delivery options and so on. And it's got the purchase order date. Now, if I click on save, we've got our very, very basic information there. the company, and basically who you're ordering from. So the next step would be to actually add the items, and they're kind of, you know, classified as purchase order line items. So if I click on new purchase order line item, again, it brings up this page, but majority of the time, 99% of the time, okay, maybe a little bit less, you'll be using item. So if I click on item, it brings up this page. So this is, you know, think of it as the items that you're selecting. The purchase order lines are the items that you're selecting. So there's a lookup here to item. So you've got this field here called item being procured. So this is the item that you're ordering. This is a lookup list to items, another object, but you know, you set up your items within the system as well. I'm going to pick this item here, battery, because I've done some setup in the background for it. So at this point, you want to enter a quantity. I'll just put in 1 to keep it simple for now. Unit cost, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave blank for now. I'm doing that on purpose. I'll show you why, because what I want to show as well is you can have supplier catalogs set up. So when you pick a certain item from a certain supplier, it should default a unit cost price. So supplier current promise date. So this is when you're expecting the goods. This is when the supplier has said they can deliver. You could have the ship to warehouse on the line as well, but we're taking it from the header, so that's fine. Right hand side, we don't these fields here. We don't need to do anything. They're more informational. You know, it's just got to look up to the purchase order, what you've received up to now, which is nothing, the status, and so on. So if I click on save now, right, it takes us to the purchase order line. Now, there is a link back to the purchase order header itself, which is what we want to do because we want to look at the overall, purchase order itself. So if you go back to the purchase order, you can see the header information, which contains the supplier, and you've got the line here as well, the item that you want to order. Right. So I'll just quickly show you this. There's a price button here. Now, you can see at the moment the unit cost is 0. If I click on price, the unit cost has changed to 300. I'll just quickly show you that's due to having a catalog set up. So if you bear me 1 second, I'll just very quickly show you where the catalogs are. It's very simple. It's very user friendly how the catalogs work. So you've got supplier catalogs here. And if you remember correctly, the supplier for the battery was Gadget Company. So I've already got a catalog set up here. So if I go into catalog here, it's got the supplier site, a buyer, and so on. But most importantly, it has a supplier catalog item. So if I drill into there, you can see the battery there. And what I've said is the list price is 300. It's active, and you can also have price breaks in there. So that's if, for example, if you order from 0 to 30, you pay 300. If over from 301 to 500, you get it's 50 pounds less or euros less. So you can do price breaks as well. So that's where this unit price is coming from. Okay, so we have a purchase order. We have the purchase order line. So the next step would be to have the purchase order approved. Now you can have the approval, you can have approvals, and that's one of the main reasons you want a purchase ordering system as well, to have some approval, some control around your purchase orders. But you can move the purchase or the approvals themselves to whatever point. But in this instance, it makes sense once you have the head of the line to submit it for approval before you kind of send it off and so on. So I'm going to click on this submit for approval. For this demo, we've just simplified it and just set up an automatic approval rule, so it changes to approved. But depending on your approval rules, it would fire off an email to a designated approver who would then approve or reject the purchase order. Once it's approved, that's it. We're good to go. We need to transmit basically the purchase order, to the supplier, so that they have a record of what you've actually ordered. So there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can print the PDF off, and, you know, send it in the post or whatever, or, you know, this is just an example, a mock-up of a purchase order itself. But this again is quite highly configurable. Or there's a send button here as well. If I click on send, you know, through some background wizardry and some setup that we've done in the background on the supplier, what it will do is it will send a copy of that PDF purchase order that we just viewed off to the supplier. And I've just set this up to go to me at the moment, so I'm just gonna show you it. Okay, there it is. Right, so again, this is a standard email template, but again, it can be configured to say whatever you want, and it has a an attachment of the PDF. So, okay. So at this point, purchase order approved, sent off to the supplier. Supplier's received it. They've sent you the goods. You've received them. So what you need to do is tell the system that, okay, I've received the goods. And it's a good way of validating, you know, that, you know, everything is correct, that you've ordered something, you've actually received it, and so on. So you can see here on the header, there's a section called receipts. So if I click on new receipt, it brings up this page here, which is a lookup to the purchase order. You don't need to do anything here. It's just showing you the link back to the purchase order. If I click on continue, it brings up this page. On this page, you can see there's only one field that that's editable. That's the receiving quantity. But the rest, it just shows you, the rest of the line just shows you what you actually originally ordered. So it shows you the item number, description, quantity, and so on. So you can under receive, which, you know, can happen quite a lot, but you can't over receive. So in this instance, just to keep it simple, I'm just going to receive the quantity, which is saved now. Now this is, we've done serial control, serial number control in this demo environment. This can be switched on or off, you know, depending on your requirements, but I'm just going to put in I made a serial number. I'm going to click on save. It's especially handy for, you know, if you use serial numbers, believe it or not. Okay, so sorry, on that page there was a receipt number, so I clicked on that receipt number, which takes me back to the receipt itself. There is a few clicks involved, but you can see the purchase order. There's always a link back to the purchase order, and that's where, you know, most of the time you want to be. So if I go back to the purchase order now, we now have a purchase order which is approved, sent to the supplier, who's sent you the goods, and you've received the goods into the system. So that's your purchase ordering part done. So now it's really a matter of paying your supplier. So on the purchase order itself, you see a section called AP vouchers, accounts payable vouchers. Now, if I click on new AP voucher, takes you to this page. Don't need to do anything. Should be open if you're creating a new AP voucher. Now, there's a couple of ways you can, you know, create an AP voucher. You can do it from the purchase order screen, which is probably the best because it keeps a link back to the purchase order. Or, you know, you can have a separate tab, but it would mean kind of, you know, putting in the purchase order number and so on. So if I click on continue, it brings us to this page. Think of it as a header again, similar to the purchase order header. Now, at this point, you know, possibly, well, you physically have the invoice in front of you. And, you know, based on that, you're entering the supplier invoice number. So, oh, okay, I've looked at the invoice number. The invoice number is 1230987. Yeah, you put in the date that you've received the invoice. There's a due date that's coming from, I think it's coming from the account setup, but it's usually 30 days net. And the rest of the fields we don't really need to do anything with because it's pulling the information through the purchase order anyway. So if I click on save at this point, it takes us to this screen. Yeah. Now on this screen, you see this, there's a section called AP voucher line. So what's really happening is you know, you're pulling the lines, you're looking up the lines that were on the purchase order. So if I click on new voucher line PO, it's looking up what was ordered on the purchase order and making sure it's the same as what's on the invoice in effect. So if I select this line and say, you know, if we quickly review it, it is the battery, it's a quantity of 1 and unit cost of 300. Now you can see that the quantity voucher and the unit cost are editable. You can, but I won't at this moment in time. But let's just add that for the moment. Now, if I did change the quantity vouchered or the unit price, these fields would be populated, unit PPV and extended PPV. It's basically showing the difference between what you actually ordered and what's on the invoice. Now, generally what you would do is have some approval rules around the unit PPV and the extended PPV, you know, just to kind of fire something off to somebody to notify them, to get them to approve that, okay, I raised the, you know, the purchase order and the invoice don't match. You know, we're going to make a payment, but is that okay, in a sense? So you have got some control around, you know, kind of if the PO and the invoice don't match as well. But anyway, we pull the line from the PO. It does match up with the invoice. Everything looks good at this point. So I'm just going to go ahead. There's a match button here, which is which I'm going to click. So I've clicked on that. And what this in effect has done is it's taken the PO, it's taken the invoice and the receipt, and it's done a three-way match between all three, saying, okay, the receipt, you've received the goods, the purchase order, and the invoice amounts and quantities match. This is great. Okay. Now, you can see at this point that there's a status field. Now, that status field originally, sorry, I probably should have mentioned that earlier, but the status field originally was showing as open, I think. That has now changed to matched. And there's also a field here on the header called payable invoice. Now, it takes a few minutes, but once you do the match, what should happen is a payable invoice should be created. Yep. So this is the payable invoice that's going to be paid. It has a link to it. So if I click on pin there, it shows you what's on the payable invoice itself. So it shows you the account, currency, the value as well. And at this point, you know, if tax needs to be applied, the tax is calculated. You can see that here. And basically, it's ready to be posted. But in this case, it's already been posted. So that's your whole process from purchase ordering all the way through to, you know, a payable invoice. But I'd just like to show you a different flavor of something that you could do slightly different involving the Pizza app. So if we have a look at the Pizza app, right. So if we take a few steps back, if we go back to a point where a purchase order has been created, approved, sent, and received, but we haven't done anything in terms of, you know, the invoice. Yeah. So at that point, what you could do is when you receive the invoice, you know, you could have it so that the supplier sends you an electronic copy. Now, with the Pizza app, what would happen is you would give your supplier a email address to send the electronic invoice to. Once they do that, it will be scanned and entered into the system, and it will look something like this. I won't go too, you know, in depth, but just to kind of give you an idea. So, you know, this is basically what we've done, you know, previously. A purchase order from Gadget Company to Merlin Technologies Limited for a battery, which is 300 with the tax and so on. I've done a little bit of work beforehand, but once it's scanned in, you can see there's two sides to the screen. One is the scan copy, and the other side is a, you know, a page basically, which is editable. Is still editable. So you can see some fields, some of the fields such as the amount, the invoice number, the supplier should all be picked up from the invoice itself, but it still gives you the options of saying, okay, I've received the invoice. The company's wrong. I can change the company here. The supplier, you shouldn't really be changing that because it's, it's one of the main, things that should have been kind of, should be correct right from the beginning. But it still gives you the option. There is some flexibility that could be locked down if you wanted, but you can change the vendor account, the invoice number, dates, the amounts, and so on. And probably the most important bit here is the GL, the accounting part here as well. It still gives you the options of picking the expense accounts and so on. So at this point, what you can do is, if everything's correct, everything lines up and so on, you can submit to payable invoice process. So this is the eliminating the need to create an AP voucher, which then on the back of that, it kind of creates a payable invoice. But if you see now, what would have happened is a pin's been created via PISA, and it's, we have a quick look at the pin itself. It's similar to, it has all the information there. So, that's two different flavors that you can have. And if you go back to the purchase order for this particular invoice, it should update the the purchase order as well with this invoice information. So that's two different flavors really. That's the overall process from purchase order through to approval. I guess the differences are between the two using the PISA that, within Financial Forces Spend Management module, you're going through the whole process of PO and, an AP match and an invoice. If you don't want to kind of, if you want to have a little bit more control, if you want scanned invoices and so on, you can eliminate the need to create an AP voucher and invoice, through the purchase order module. You can go directly into PISA where it can be scanned in, reviewed, and basically a PIN being generated and posted, and which will then update the PO. So that's, a very simplified flow of, spend management within Financial Force. There are, of course, variations and, differences in how you could possibly use it, depending on your kind of business rules and, business cases and so on. But again, Salesforce is extremely flexible. You can, if something doesn't quite work right for you, then, you have the tools, declarative or programmatic within Salesforce to be able to kind of amend it to work for your needs. So that's it from me in terms of spend management. I was wondering if anyone had any questions.
Yes, indeed. So let's use the remaining time, if there are questions, to be able to give the floor to participants. Any questions so far? Or any comments maybe?
Yeah, it's open for discussion if anyone wants to, just discuss something as well, rather than a question, but
okay, so in any case, if there are no, let's say, no burning topics right now to discuss in this webinar, then what we will do, we will send around the recordings. So there's always a possibility to read back to us with questions, etc. And also we can obviously then also give a more, let's say, in-depth demonstration if desired. Okay, then thanks everybody for joining the webinar. Wish you a good working day, and hope to get back in touch with you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Thanks. Bye.